welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by an author who's here to talk about a sophomore. Is that what they call the second book? A sophomore?
Sophomore, yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah,
Um,
sophomore novel.
yeah. It's such a good read. It is an absolute roller coaster, and it caused some serious sleep deprivation for me. And I am so excited to talk about it. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Yeah, sure. My name is Kate Russo, and I'm the author of Until Alison.
I am so excited to delve into this in the most careful, circumspect ways possible so that we don't reveal anything. It is such a good read with so many really affecting scenes and reveals. But before we get into that, could you tell us a little bit about your writing career in general and perhaps your first book, Superhost?
Yeah. So my first book, Superhost, really could not be more of a different book from this one. So I hadn't. None of this is planned. Maybe for some authors it is, but for me, where I go, none of this was planned. But Superhost was a comedy by and large. Although with both books, I feel as though that notion of something that's really funny and something that's really sad are just opposite sides of the same coin. So I play with that idea in both books. It just so happens that you're on the funnier side of the coin in Superhost and you're on the sadder side of the coin in Until Alison. But I think they share a lot in common. Still, I think, when somebody were to read Superhost, I think you'll see, there's a lot of lost young women in Superhost who come and rent Bennett's house. It's ultimately the story about a man whose career is going down the tubes, and so he rents his house on Airbnb. And these women who come to stay there are often searching for something, and very similar in the ways to which I think Rachel is really searching for something in Until Alison. So this idea of loneliness and lonely characters, people who don't quite know themselves, are at the heart of both books.
That makes a ton of sense to me. Yeah, because tonally
Yeah.
they feel very different at times, but you do it does feel like they're in continuity as well, just in terms of
Hmm.
that, dichotomy, which is a
Hmm.
cool trick to have two books that are so different yet, speak to some of the same things.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd love if you could talk a little bit about the dual timeline and
Hmm.
how you use that to explore one of the big themes of the book and one of the big things that you delve into, the short and long-term effects of like toxic friend dynamics and bullying
Yeah.
in childhood and adolescence.
Yeah.
Could you talk about shaping those dynamics between Rachel and Allison and perhaps the wider friend group?
Yeah, sure. So this book takes place in 2016 is the present day story, and then there is quite a lot of 2008 flashback. And Rachel and Allison have known each other essentially their whole lives. They've grown up going to school together, and they end up at the same college. And so the 2008 material is when they're in junior high, and the 2016 material is in their last year of high school, or sorry, their last year of college. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do it that way is because actually, I mean, when we think about it, 2008, 2016, for me in my 40s, that doesn't seem like a very big gap of time. But when you're 14 and 22, 8 years is huge. But these two women have been kind of frenemies, really, for that stretch of time. But I started in 2008 because I really feel that junior high. Number one, I'm absolutely fascinated by junior high. I always have been. It's such a horrible time, but it's one of those times that I find really really interesting because I think it's the time in which we really learn how to be cruel. And kids can be cruel when they're younger, but I don't think they necessarily quite understand the consequences of their actions. Whereas when you get to junior high, there's a manipulative quality to the cruelty that I think didn't exist before for kids. And so for me, this book was like sort of diving into the genesis of what makes us cruel, and why do you know, and some of us sort of, what makes us cruel, what makes us decide to stand by and watch other people be cruel and do nothing, what makes us decide to be brave. And I think all of these things are kind of born in that time. And it's not to say that we can't change them. If anything, I hope this book proves that you can change maybe what you set your what you thought was your truth at age 13 or 14. But really just, yeah, wait, why does this start? Because that kind of old adage of hurt people, this grows, when we start and we make these decisions when we're younger, they grow and they affect our whole lives, maybe not completely tangentially, but the way we think and the way we see the world. So Rachel and Allison, um, Rachel is very concerned with how she is seen. She doesn't particularly know herself. And so she wants everyone else to tell her who she is. And that involves really, really paying attention to what everyone else thinks. Um, Allison, on the other hand, doesn't care what anybody thinks. She is very much her own person, but she's also quite awkward. And so at some point, Rachel decides, oh, I have to stop being friends with Allison, or I'm going to be as bullied as she is. And so that's what's happening at age 13, 14. And the ramifications of that are like still in their lives in their 20s, and they end up at the same school and they still don't really know how to be around each other because they're still feeling this hurt from junior high.
It's so interesting to me to specifically compare like that junior high period with that sort of like
Hmm.
early 20s college years because, while reading,
Yeah.
it occurred to me that like those are both times that can be really fraught for old friendships because like you're becoming
Hmm.
different people, and like the friends no longer really know each other some ways and they have to get to know
Hmm.
each other again and those new people don't always really like each other. Um,
Yeah.
and oh my gosh, just the way that it's all heightened by, being just by dint of being 2008, the presence of social media and sort of the
Hmm.
ways in which that can escalate things so much. Like every day, I just like am so grateful that I was, a middle schooler before that technology
me
around.
me too, me too.
Yeah.
When I remember in sort of 2007, 2008, I was I must have been listening to NPR. I was living in the UK at the time, so it was probably NPR equivalent over there. And they were talking about, it was right around the time they were going to start letting 13 and 14-year-olds have Facebook accounts. And there was just all these discussions, are you or aren't you going to let your teenager have an account on the site? And I just remember it being this huge topic. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna put these kids in what at the time was a pretty uncharted territory. And I mean, nowadays there's all manner of, things that people do to stop bullying on social media and things that people definitely don't do. But we're much, much more aware of it. Whereas back then it was kind of like, okay, we're not quite sure what's going to happen when we let these kids loose. But of course we knew it was going to happen. And of course it happens. They're going to bully each other.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like
Yeah.
horrifying in its predictability.
Yes.
Um, so we have the dual timelines, as we mentioned before.
Mhm.
One is sort of charts the course of this really fraught friendship slash rivalry. And then the other is in 2016, where Rachel is a student journalist at college.
Mhm.
And so I'd love if you could talk a little bit about, Rachel in the quote unquote present, the present of the
Yeah.
the narrative,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
choosing to set it at that time. And how your depiction of her life as a student journalist, how is that shaped by your experiences as a student journalist?
Mm. Yeah, so the one thing that you learn, this is not a spoiler because you learn this in the first sort of 3 or 4 pages of the book, maybe even on the first page, is that Allison has died. She's died under strange. She's murdered. You understand that her death, the circumstances are not good, and so Rachel is she's the news editor of her paper, and she's of course carrying all of this guilt on all of this confusion from their junior high years together, and she is tasked with finding out what happened to Allison. And she doesn't want the women on her newspaper staff to know what she knows about Allison, in part because she thinks they're going to take her off the story, and in part because she's just so guilty and embarrassed about what happened in junior high that she doesn't want to share it. Her friends on the paper are these kind of, to Rachel's mind, these sort of beautiful liberal women who never make mistakes. And so she doesn't want them to know about all the mistakes that she's made. So she's coming into this newspaper assignment, kind of lying as a journalist, and not divulging what she knows, including the fact that she had seen Allison the night that she died. So that is a lot of the thriller aspect of the book, is how much do you trust Rachel? How much does she know? What about their past might have in some way something to do with why Allison died? So you are investigating with Rachel what happened, while at the same time not sure if you should trust the conclusions that she's coming to. And from my own journalistic experience, one of the things that you learn about Rachel early on is that, yes, she's the news editor of her paper, but she also knows that she doesn't want to be a journalist. So she's gone through college, she's an English major, she's concentrating in journalism, and it's kind of struck her that actually she doesn't have what it takes to be a journalist. And that experience was an experience that I had. So I wasn't an English major, but I was the news editor of my college paper. And by my senior year, I was realizing that I just was not enjoying myself. I didn't I didn't want to ask questions, which is not a great, position for a journalist to be in. And then my classmate was murdered, and I had to cover it. And nothing like the fiction of this book, these two girls go way back. I did not know the girl on my campus that was murdered. We'd never had a conversation. That said, when it happened, I felt, we were having a conversation in the newsroom, and we were saying, okay, well, who's going to go speak to her roommates? And I remember everybody's eyes kind of falling on me. And I said, oh God, I don't want to do that. I want to give them their privacy. And that was kind of the moment when I realized that journalism absolutely was not cut out for me, because a journalist would go and get the quote. and I simply couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it. And a lot of what's at the heart of this book is really that, and again, I don't think this is a spoiler, but it's really kind of about how, when you do actually solve a crime, or when a crime is solved for you by the police, oftentimes the answers don't actually make us feel any better. And we go hunting for the truth, when often the truth does not provide us with the solace that we were hoping for. And that was certainly the case when I was in college and I was doing this story. And so I wanted that reflected in this book, which is that kind of the answers. I mean, we're certainly living it today. I mean, the answers aren't comforting. I can't imagine trying to be a journalist today. I'm so glad I didn't go down that path, because I would not have the stomach to be a journalist in the world that we're living in today. But yeah, fiction offers a chance to play with the truth without having to adhere to the facts, which is what I enjoy. So,
Oof. Yeah,
yeah.
you really captured that sense of, not only is Rachel like affected by her personal connection to Allison, but
Mhm.
just by being, frankly, out of her depth in terms of
Yeah.
journalistic experience and, sort
Mhm.
of themes and topics and sort of difficult material she's worked with. So you really capture that sense of like overwhelm with the situation, and yet it's still
Mhm.
like it still is like somehow a sense of not solace, but like a place to put the feelings that she doesn't really kind of want to experience
Mhm.
in relation to it. So yeah, it's really like emotionally complex, and you sort of capture like all these different motivations and how they are driving her decision making, which is,
Yeah.
varied. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a real class element to this book too, and so Allison comes from a very wealthy family. To everyone around her, it seems like everything is going to be handed to her on a silver platter, and for the most part, that's true, really, up until the day she's murdered. So Rachel's dealing with that. Rachel comes from a much more middle class family. She has a scholarship to go to college, which she doesn't really want people to know about. And part of the reason that she's studying journalism as opposed to, say, creative writing is that she feels she needs to have a career that will pay her. And so much of creative writing in her mind seems fanciful, and how she won't be able to pay her bills with something like that. And and plus, there's just that, I think, larger pressure on young women to just be practical in their career choices. And so here she is, sort of like doing everything she thinks she's supposed to be doing, and she's miserable. So that's also kind of the backdrop.
yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
amazing that just in the 4 years that you're in college, you grow so much. And I think the 4 years of college is just enough time to really determine whether you want to pursue something or not. So
Mhm.
it's, yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, yeah, something else that I thought of, a lot about with Rachel is sort of like how regret can work as a motivator and how that can
Hmm.
impact decision making and stuff like that
Yeah.
in the moment. Um, One of the things that occurred to me, like we were talking before about like the sort of people, friends getting to know each other again at different phases in life. One of those things about
Hmm.
growing up too is just like sort of coming to terms with the person that you were, you know? So
Hmm.
that's can really drive a lot of really risky behavior.
Yeah. No, I think that's such a huge part of this book, and I think also part of why I've written it now in my 40s is that it's hard. You go back to thinking about junior high to high school to college, and it's hard for me not to sort of just cringe when I remember certain things, like, oh, I can't believe I said that to that person, or I can't believe I behaved like that. And and we carry these things with us. And I always think, oh, if I were to run into that person, what would I say to them? Would I have the courage to say I'm sorry? Would they not even care? And I think about these things all the time, and I hope other people do too. I hope it's not just me. And but I wanted to give that sort of to Rachel, which is sort of like, she has really done wrong by Allison. She has really hurt her. And now she's gone, and Rachel has to sort of live with the fact that, were the sorries that she said, were they enough? Did she do enough? And how can she make up for it? And when the person that she would need to make up for it for is no longer alive. And I'd like to think that these two women eventually would have found their way back to friendship had Allison lived. And I think that's the journey that Rachel ultimately makes, is sort of, towards the end of the book, I think she begins to really have an understanding of what was so special about her relationship with Allison, which I won't give away, obviously, because it's the end of the book. But that sort of growth that we have, that really wouldn't exist without regret. People are always saying no regrets, and I'm thinking, well, how on earth do you grow if you have no regrets? So, and Rachel has a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is so interesting.
Yeah.
If Rachel's journey is akin to something that's like with all the things that you're talking about and a certain sense of like being okay with a lack of closure or being okay with
Hmm.
not knowing, like that is
Yeah.
antithetical to the journey of the journalist as well. You have
Yeah.
to have a sort of
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And she doesn't, she's in this weird position where she doesn't want to know, but she also can't stand not knowing. And so she requires a certain amount of certainty in her ignorance, which is of course impossible, and why she's so miserable because you can't live like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, are there other things that you feel like you took from your experience in student journalism, beyond the sort of what you metabolized into this book? Are there skills from that kind of writing that you feel like you took into your fiction writing? Like, how did that experience
Mm.
shape your writing in general?
I think there's a lot of things that I sort of carry maybe without even realizing it. But the main one is writing to deadline. When you're creating an issue every week, you are writing all the time, and so and you have to write even when you don't feel like it. So because you've got to meet this deadline, and so now I've never really I don't have this problem, which I know a lot of writers have, which is sort of like, well, I don't feel like writing. um, it doesn't, it's sort of, it doesn't matter whether or not I feel like writing. I have to sit down and do it. And it can be bad, because that was always the case with my articles too. I mean, the first draft was always bad, and then you sort of go back and you make it better, but you have to start. And so I think that starting point with the blank page now is so much more is easier for me, because if I was writing 4 or 5 articles a week, that was 4 or 5 blank pages a week. Not even including whatever essays I was writing for classes. So I think I've really kind of conquered a fear of a blank page, which is extremely useful, and long may it last.
Wow. Yeah, that's super interesting. How much of that is also wrapped up in like sort of letting go of the perfectionist drive, akin to what you were just saying, like that trusting the
Mhm.
process just to like trust that it will happen in the second or third or whatever draft if it's not
Yeah.
happening in that first one.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's that kind of thing where if you want the first draft to be perfect, then you're never going to get anything done. And I feel fortunate to have learned that really really quite quickly, and not been a perfection. I mean, I say to people all the time, my first drafts are truly horrible, and you just have to be accepting of it. And when you go through and read it again, just laugh at yourself and fix it. Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting to talk about like the book with you and your process. Thank you so much for coming and sharing it with us. What
Of
is
course.
what's next for you? Are you writing something currently?
I am writing. I've said this to a couple people. I'm writing 3 things.
Wow.
So a lot of times people ask me what's next, and my response has been, I wish I knew. So I've got 3 books on the go, and I have no idea which one is going to win. I love all 3 ideas. I think all 3 will be written, at some point in the next God knows how many years. But some you can't, or at least I can't write 3 books at once. So one of them needs to take over. But oftentimes that's what happens is once you get to the point where now I'm publicizing this book and that will soon be over, and then I can really sit down and say, okay, who's going to win. And then that'll be great because they're all in that really exploratory phase where you're not quite sure what's happening and you're just meeting the characters and they're doing surprising things. And yeah, so it's the fun part at the
Nice.
moment.
You have to figure
Yeah.
out where they're going to exist on the superhost until Allison spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. Somewhere in the middle, I'm hoping.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. This has been so interesting. And yeah, I
Yeah.
can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jen.
No problem. All right, listeners, please check out Until Allison and check out Superhost while you're at it. Why not? It's out now. It'll be out when you hear this. So head to your favorite bookstore or library or website. Do you have a place that you like to send people for books?
Well, I mean, always your local library. If hopefully they've got it. If not, I will beg and plead for you to shop at indie bookstores. My sister owns one. She owns one in Portland, Maine, called Print a Bookstore. If you order it from them, you will get a unicorn drawing from me in it, and there's a significance to that. There's a unicorn in the book. So that's always a little incentive to order from my particular favorite indie, which is Print a Bookstore.
Nice. That is a great suggestion and a great incentive. All right, so you know what your homework is, listeners. Go to it. Thank you so much for joining us. It is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.